Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September 2nd meeting of the BRN APRN Advisory Committee. And I'd like to start by a call to order for establishing a quorum. Mitchell Erickson is here.
Alyssa Brown is here.
Danielle Bloom here.
Charlotte Golette-Moore here.
Karen Karp here.
Mitch, can I ask for one request when you guys do any votes or like roll call like this? If you could do a roll call vote where you call out the person's name and then they say here, that would be really appreciated by my note takers.
Perfect. I will do that.
Thank you.
We can begin again. Mitchell Erickson is here. Karen Karp.
Here.
Charlotte Gallup-Moore.
Here.
Garrett Chan. We know he's not here yet. Jane Perlis. I didn't hear from her. Sandra Bordy.
Here.
Danielle Bloom.
Here.
Alyssa Brown.
Here.
Perfect. We have established a quorum. We can move on to item 2.0, and I will let Mark explain.
Good morning. This is the BRN moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the committee reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on, and members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and unmute their microphone. The individual will have 2 minutes to make their comments. I will not give a warning as your time approaches. I will mute your microphone and will announce that your time has exceeded the time allotted. I will then move on to the next member of the public who has a comment. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. We've changed this, and it seems that public has asked questions. I will defer to the committee on whether or not they want to answer those questions. Otherwise, in the past, it has been just for comments only. Such inquiries submitted using this feature may or may not be answered. When asking a question, please make sure the question is directed at the host, me, in the dropdown. I will provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when board members or committee members or senior staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And we will move on to 3.0. So this is an opportunity for the public to make comment for items that are not on the agenda. And I just wanted to point out to the public that although we can't discuss whatever comments you make, we can decide as a committee to bring those forward to a future meeting of the APRNEC. Thank you. And so, Mark, you can open it up for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Mary Abbott would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Ms. Abbott.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for taking the time to hear my comment. I'm glad I had the opportunity to find this meeting. I have completed my CNS training 3 months ago. more than 3 months ago, submitted all of my documentation, and am still waiting for anything to be updated on the BRN website. I check it routinely, have tried to not call or not be a burden to them and their workload. But this is getting very frustrating. I've had a job offer and I can't accept it. I can't move forward. So that's been extremely frustrating. I also am a grant recipient from OSHPD, and I do have a service requirement that I need to begin completing. So my question for the committee is there any plan to address the slow processing of APRN credentials at the BRN?
Thank you.
Thank
This
you.
is Lori. I'm the board's executive officer. Please send me an email to loretta.melby@dca.ca.gov. That is LORETTA.MELB as in boy Y @dca.ca.gov. If you have a difficult time remembering that or jotting it down, it is on our website, rn.ca.gov. You go to our website, go to contact us, and I'm listed under executive leadership. Please send me an email with your concerns and I will get it routed and addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Abbott. Jeannie Meyer would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hi, it's Jeannie. I'm actually the current president of CACNS, California Association of Clinical Nurse Specialists. I just wanted to share that multiple members of our committee had shared how valuable this committee is in continuing to meet. And so I wanted to be sure that I did bring that forward, that CACNS leadership is viewing this committee as very valuable and wanted to be sure that it's going to continue forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie, for your comments.
Thank you. Committee Chair Erickson, there are no other public requests for comment. So would you like me to close this window?
You may close the window, Mark. Thank you. So I'd like to move on to agenda item 4.0, which is review and approve the minutes from March 29th of 2022, which was our last meeting. And I would like to first offer up any edits or changes by the committee members, if anyone has any comments in their review that they'd like edited. Barring any comments from the committee, could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move, Alyssa Brown.
And a second?
I second. This is Charlotte Gollett Moore.
Thank you. And Mark, could you open it up for public comment before we vote? Thank you.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Erickson, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
You can close the window. Thank you, Mark. I'd like to call a vote for approval of the motion before us to approve the minutes. Mitchell Erickson votes yes. Karen Karp,
Yes.
Alyssa Brown,
Yes.
Sandra Bordy,
Yes.
Charlotte Gallup Moore,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
and I think Garrett is now present.
Can you hear me, Mitch?
Yes.
Yes, this is Garrett. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I think I got everyone. So the minutes are so approved, and we'll move on to agenda 5.0. So this is a discussion and possible action regarding the APRNAC member terms and the charter. So in our last meeting, the charter was updated and was in its draft form, but that's now been approved by the BRN board. And this committee sits at the behest of the BRN board on an annual renewal basis. However, the charter follows the pattern for all advisory committees to the BRN. And so I am going to ask Loretta to review this final and approved version of the charter for this committee. And then afterwards, we'll talk about committee membership terms of office.
Thank you. So actually, I can answer any questions on the charter, but what the agenda item is specific for term members as specified in the updated charter. So I'm not going to review the entire charter unless that's something that you guys wish, because we have had it in front of the APRN committee last time. But the section specifically on the committee terms, and your guys' advisory committee is actually the one that brought it to our attention because all of y'all termed out in April of this year. And so every single person on this committee would no longer be here, and you guys would have all termed out in April of this last year if we didn't address this and get some special consideration. So when this committee was formed, it was formed with everybody having equal term limits. And if you guys had equal term limits, you would start and stop at the very same time. You would not have continuity. There would be no mentorship that would kind of be able to be allowed to go on. And that was deemed to be quite problematic. So when we developed the Nurse Practice Advisory Committee, the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee, when we updated the NEWAC Advisory Committee, we decided to include the APRN AC as part of that update. We aligned all the charters, and we now need to discuss and vote on term limits. So what the term limits do is allows for everybody to stagger. This mirrors exactly what was done to our board members when they when our board had a sunrise about 10 years ago, where it had members that served in similar designations and 1 year prior to another member. So what we are looking at here for term membership, is to look at the 2 NPs. And right now I know that we do have 3 NPs currently on here, which would be Mitch, Charlotte, and Jane. And so I know that Jane is not current, but I did have conversation with her. And so she did volunteer that if both Mitch and Charlotte wanted to stay on and continue, that she would be the one that would bow out gracefully. But if either Mitch or Charlotte chose that they would want to end their term, that she would stay on if we could move the meeting days away from a Tuesday or a Thursday so that she can attend. It does interfere with her work schedule as it is. So I will put that out there to you guys as we kind of consider the nurse practitioners. And so of the 2 nurse practitioners, and that would be either Mitch or Charlotte, if either of you guys had a preference, one would serve a 4-year term as their initial term, and one would serve a 3-year term with the ability to extend. So as you guys can imagine, you guys have already served since 2018. So you guys have served either the 3 or the 4 of that. And then either of you guys, one of you guys would continue on for an additional 4 years, and one would continue on for an additional 3 years from the April date. So if either of you guys have a preference, I would like to open that up to you guys at this moment to see which one you guys would rather do. Mitch, did you want to do a 3 or 4 beginning term, or Charlotte, did you have a preference for a 3 or 4 year beginning term?
So my first thing I wanted to state is that this is unrelated to the NP configuration, is that as we know, Garrett Chan on this committee is now the chair of the NEWAC committee. And first of all, I wanted to acknowledge Garrett's amazing support for this committee and participation and dedication as he steps away from this committee naturally as the chair of the NEWAC committee, because he can't be on both committees. So I just want to thank Garrett for his contributions both to the BRN, the public, and this committee. So thank you, Garrett.
Thank you, Mitch. I promise I wasn't going to let that go unsaid. I was going to address it when we got down to CNSs, since that's the role that he had transferred to serve under.
Correct.
But yes, thank you for bringing that forward.
Thank you, Garrett.
I just want to say, if I can, I would like to go, I think, on record that I may be the person farthest away from Sacramento because I just landed in Oslo, Norway. And so I'm greeting you from Northern Europe. But this group was very important to me. And so thanks, Mitch, thanks, Loretta and Melissa and everybody for your kind comments.
Oofda.
And
Perfect.
thank you for choosing to continue with the board, Garrett, and chair the NEWAC committee. I think your experience is going to be very well received there.
Doesn't mean you're off the hook, Garrett, for periodic advice.
Just as long as it doesn't violate vaguely key, we're good with that. Just as long as we keep that in mind. Mitch.
Yeah, no, just friendly conversation. So in terms of my choice, Charlotte, I'm okay with whatever you choose, whatever works for you.
Wow, I didn't know that this decision was going to be made here and today.
It
Yes.
is.
Do
you have a
I
preference?
did read the meeting materials. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot going on. I didn't know I was going to be running for public office, and there's a huge probability that I may, hopefully, if everyone votes smart, that I win. My responsibilities will increase, and so I don't know if it would be fair for me to pick up another 3 or 4 years with this amazing advisory committee. I do appreciate the opportunity, but I just don't want to overextend myself and not provide 120% of capability to serve on this committee. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to not be able to continue the torch and serve
Okay.
this advisory.
Well,
So then what that looks like we'll do at this point, Mitch, is Jane did agree to stay on. So Jane would take the nurse practitioner second position. She was fine with any of the term limits. And so what we would do at this point is allow Charlotte to term out as of the end of today's meeting. And then you can continue to pursue your run for public office. I'm excited to see what that brings. That's wonderful news, and congratulations. That's great news.
Thank you.
So Mitch, do you have a preference of continuing for an additional 4 years or staying on for 3?
yeah, so I think for continuity and just the fact that I've been present for all of the meetings and Jane has been enabled, that I'll just take the 4-year slot. Jane can take the 3-year slot. We will be considerate of her Tuesday, Thursday limitations for the 3-year slot.
Thank you so much. And so we'll move on to the CRNA positions. And the CRNA positions, one would be 3 and one would be 4, very similar. And so of the CRNAs, we have Karen Karp and we have Sandra Bordy. Do you guys have a preference on which one would suit your term best? I'll open it up to Karen and Sandra.
Sandy and I haven't had an opportunity to discuss. Sandy, what would you prefer?
I particularly do not have a preference. I'm willing to do a 4-year or a 3-year. I would like to stay on though. So I'm letting that decision up to you, Karen, since you are the vice chair of this committee.
Yeah, either will work for me. I would love to stay on too. I defer to you.
Okay, since you guys are both deferring, our legal counsel,
That's
Reza.
not gonna work, Sandra and Karen. One of you have to actually commit.
No, actually, this works out quite well. So this happened in some of our other advisory committees. And Reza Pezures, our legal counsel, and I know he wasn't introduced at the beginning, but he has a app on his phone that picks a number, and y'all take either even or odd or closest to. So I will open up to him to help do the tiebreaker here. Reza.
I love random numbers.
Thanks. Yeah, we did this last time due to not having a coin within arm's reach to just flip a coin.
That's perfect.
And the app is just Siri on the phone. So if one of you would, I think the way we did it last time, have one of you pick a number, even or odd. And if it's even, we'll say, I mean, if let's start with this. Why don't one of you pick even or odd?
Go ahead, Sandy.
Call it odd.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask Siri to do a random. If it's odd, we'll say Sandra will get the 4-year term. If it's not odd, 3 years. Does that sound fair? I'm kind of just arbitrarily setting this up. I don't think it should matter, but okay.
We hope Siri is fair in her choices.
Yeah. Hey Siri, pick a random number.
Not able to
Okay,
see.
so she chose. I'm sorry. 13 is the number she chose. I don't think my background thing is screwing it up,
Okay,
but
it looks like Karen gets 4 years and Sandra gets
13.
3.
Yep.
Is that correct?
No,
Yes, it was odds.
Wasn't the other way around? Didn't you select odd, Sandra?
Yeah, Sandy picked odd.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's-
I think we said if it was odd, she would get the 4-year
Right.
Right.
term.
Perfect.
So Sandra's 4 years.
Karen's 3.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm
So we will
perfectly
now
happy
move
with
on
that.
to the next group, and that is the CNSs. And so at this point, since Garrett is vacating, we do only have one CNS, and that is Alyssa. Alyssa, would you like to continue for an additional 3 years or continue for 4?
Initially I was thinking 3, but now I'm thinking 4, because if the next person comes in for 3, my question is, then they would be eligible for one again? Is there any term limits, any?
So
Their term
they
limit
would
would be
actually
3.
fill the position that Garrett is vacating. So if you took the 4, Garrett's position would have the 3, and they would have 3 years to complete. If you took the 3, Garrett's position would have the 4, and they would have 4 years to complete.
Okay, I'll take the 4.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we will go to the last membership, and that's the nurse midwives. And our nurse midwives are Danielle and a vacant position. So Danielle, this goes to you the same. Would you like to do an additional 4 from now or only 3?
I'm gonna sign up for 4.
You're going to sign up for 4. Excellent. So what I'm going to do right now is repeat these term limits back to you guys. Our BRN staff will update the term expiration date on the Advanced Practice Registered Nursing Advisory Committee table that is on our website. So if you ever had any questions on when you guys term out or what positions are open and need to be filled or have a term expiration, then we'll be able to view that and you guys can move forward. So what I have right now is that Charlotte will be vacating and Garrett will be vacating. Jane will take the 3-year initial term. Mitch will take a 4-year initial term. Danielle, sorry, will take a 4-year initial term. Sandra will take a 4-year initial term. Alyssa will take a 4-year initial term. Karen will take a 3-year initial term. And I think that's it.
Okay.
Okay, and so you guys could make a motion to accept.
I would like to make a, before we make this motion, would it be appropriate this time, given that this is our 2-year mark and we went through this precisely 2 years ago, and I don't think it really so far falls out of the scope of this particular agenda item, which is the establishment of a chair and vice chair. Would that be reasonable, Raisa, to bring up during this moment?
I don't think we can. It
Yeah, I
wasn't.
think it's
Yeah.
normally we have it as its own distinct agenda item, and
Okay.
it's not this one. I mean, Lori, can we
just
get away
important.
with not doing it today? I don't know that
Yeah,
it's
I think we can
necessary.
get away with not doing it today and just have that slotted for our next APRN committee. Yeah.
Okay, that's
That
fine.
way it's on the
I just
agenda.
wanted to
We
be,
have a chance to prepare for that. Mitch, you're doing a great job as a chair. It just gives you
well, I
one
know,
more
but I
chance
just wanted to be
stay
fair
on.
to the original charter and the committee
Yeah.
members that these things get appointed every 2 years, and this would be more than the 2-year mark. So,
And I think the new charter, it actually goes to an annual appointment.
okay.
Similar to the rest. And so we do have some vacancies now that we will work to get filled as soon as our November board meeting ends to make sure that all of this is accepted and move forward. And if everything is voted to move forward, then we will, at the very next APRN meeting, we'll go ahead and vote in a chair and a vice chair. And those chairs and vice chair positions mirror what our board does and mirror the annual review process. And it allows for a new chair and a new vice chair to be appointed on an annual basis.
Does that follow, just so I'm clear, does that follow the sequence of the other advisory committees so that, for example, if our meeting is in March, they're all choosing a chair and vice chair in March? Just so that we're on the same pattern to make it easy.
I will have to look. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure, but it would be very similar. I know NPAC and NMAC had their first meetings in the early period of spring. So I think that the March would work. I don't know that it would work for NEWAC because NEWAC was just established in law to be statutorily required.
Right.
We did have our first meeting under the new charter where they voted in Garrett. And that would short him a little bit of a time, but I will meet with the liaison and look at what our documentation is. But with APRN, it would line up with NPAC and NMAC. And I will look to see what we can do to maybe line up NEWAC as well so that we're on the same path. But I will know more of that at the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, because then we could potentially just delay it to the second meeting of the year in 2023. All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve the terms of office for these committee members as we have already been presented. And I need a second.
Karen Karp, second.
Who is that? Sorry?
Karen Karp, second.
Karen seconds. Okay. And I'd like to bring it to public comment before we vote. Please. Thanks, Mark.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, I would like to make a comment. Jeannie Meyer would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to thank Garrett for doing such a wonderful job representing us as CNSs, advocating for us constantly, being a visible presence for us on this committee. And tell Alyssa, I'm so glad you're staying on for another 4 years. You are immortal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jeannie. It's been an honor.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you. Committee Chair Erickson, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
We can close the window. Thank you. So now I'd like to bring this motion to a vote. So Mitchell Erickson votes yes. Karen?
Karen Karp, yes.
Alyssa?
Yes.
And please just state your last name, Alyssa.
Oh, I'm sorry. Alyssa Brown, yes.
Danielle?
Danielle Bloom, yes.
Sandra?
Sandra Bordy, yes.
Garrett?
Garrett Chan, yes.
Charlotte?
Charlotte Gullap Moore, yes.
This motion passes, and we'll move on to the next agenda item. So item 6.0 has to do with the dates. So in our per our previous discussion that Loretta was describing, we're trying to align the advisory committees so that they all meet concurrently to ease the work burden of the BRN staff. And those dates would be in March and in September of each year. So our next meeting would be in March of 2023. And then the following meeting would be in September of 2023. So for those who are remaining on this committee, could we kind of discuss these now? I know, Loretta, you provided me the dates with the existing chosen dates for at least one of the committees who have already determined their 2023 dates of the advisory committees. And in trying to honor Jane Perlis's continued participation as an NP member, she's just asking not to include Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if we could all sort of scan ahead to March of 2023 and see if we can come up with a compatible date to meet that is not a Tuesday or a Thursday. And open it up for committee suggestions. At this juncture for me, it's pretty much a open book. So whatever.
Hi, this is Danielle Bloom.
Okay.
What about Wednesday, March 29th? And one later, for those of us with kids, sometimes there's a spring break issue. And so I'm just putting that out there to start the ball.
Is that consistent with Danielle with your availability for spring break? I don't even know when spring break is.
I can let you guys know that that is a perfect date for our staff.
Perfect.
The 29th, that does work for our staff, and it does work with the other committees scheduled that month as well. So the 29th would be perfect if we want to go ahead and move on that.
Perfect. Is there any opposition to 11 to 1 on March 29th that people know at this point? barring no comment, let's move on to September of 2023. There are 4 Wednesdays to choose from. And
Towards
if
the
you want,
end of September as well, that would be great. That would be consistent with balancing that with the other groups.
so that would be September the 27th, which is quite close to today's meeting. It would also be 11 to 1. Is there any opposition to choosing September 27th?
Could you hold 1 minute? I'm looking at holidays right
Absolutely.
now. Thank you.
No rush. Well, no rush for a bit.
Okay. 15, 17, yeah. What's the date again? I'm sorry.
Wednesday, the 27th of September.
It's just past Yom Kippur. That'll work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any opposition from anyone to that date selection? And then Loretta, maybe I'll just ask Macaulay to communicate once we've actually voted on these dates, that she communicate those to Jane, just so that she understands we've made accommodations for her schedule. Thank you.
We will. They will also be updated and added to our website. So at any point, the public or the committee members can go onto the website and look at the meeting schedules. That is, I think we're updated to the end of the year now, but we will be getting all of the dates and stuff planned for the entire year onto our website for 2023. I will put the caveat on, this does still have to go to our board. And
Right.
as you did hear in the public comment, I have been letting several stakeholder groups know that the APRNAC will be put forth in front of the board for a vote to see whether or not they continue an additional year, because as you guys know, the APRNAC is not a statutorily required committee. It does require an annual review, and there has been a lot of discussion in the last couple of years about the continuation of this. So that is the reason for the public comment. I did share that with the APRN Coalition Group, and that is why she made that comment at the beginning. So if this does go in front of our board and our board wishes to continue the APRNAC, then we'll let you guys know. We will move forward. Everything will be planned. Thank you guys for getting that done. And if it does sunset the APRNAC, then I want to let you guys know it would only be sunsetted in the event that a CNS committee would be established. Potentially a CRNA committee as well would be established to do the work of so much that needs to be done for both of these advanced practice specialties that we need to embark on really soon. So if not, if you guys are not sunset and you guys are allowed to continue, you will also have some direction from the board on what needs to be completed or accomplished in the next year. So we will be communicating all of that out so that you guys are all informed and kind of know what's going on. So I appreciate everything you've done to date. And if our board decides to continue, guys, this advisory committee, in November, then we have a whole nother year under our belt to get some stuff done. So thank you, guys.
Right. And I just wanted to reaffirm that the board will decide at its November meeting.
Yes, so it will probably be discussed in nursing practice at committee, because that's usually where most agenda items start. And because nursing practice board committee is essentially the same as an APRN committee, where it looks at all nursing specialties, including all 4 of the APRNs, and brings them together. That is a place where the discussion will be started. My assumption is that would be in the October agenda, and then it would go to the full board for consideration in November. And then at that point, we do notify our DCA director about the wish to continue, and then we move forward at that point.
Perfect.
Can
All
I?
right. Go ahead.
Before we start agenda item 6.0, in regards to the charter, do we have any more information as to requirements for the member of the public? I believe at the last meeting, I asked a question about whether or not the member of the public can be someone who is a licensed healthcare provider or not.
And that had not been decided as far as I know in the charter. It just says public member. And has that been solicited yet, Loretta?
Reza, did we get any feedback on whether or not the public member can be a licensed healthcare provider? It would not be one of the advanced practice or an RN. But are you thinking, Charlotte, that that would be like a
physician?
A physician. I know that that's not the intent here, because I know if we wanted, if the charter was specific to have a physician surgeon in the role, that we would have had that in there. But Reza, do you have input?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, Lori. It you know, if we wanted a physician member, they would specifically call out a physician member. But with that said, I don't know that there's any restriction on the public member being a different type of healthcare provider, unless the board chooses to put that into the charter, which it can do. By statute, there's a few limitations on public members generally at Business Professions Code 450 and some of the following sections, but that wouldn't really preclude, say, a doctor from being the public member unless the those sections have to do with public members who are a member of the professional association or an employer of RNs or things like that. So we would, of course, the public member would need to, meet those limitations, the restrictions that are laid out in those statutes. But as far as, if those don't preclude a different healthcare provider, then they're not precluded unless the board decides to put that in, which I could imagine some rationale for that limitation, but as of right now, I don't think we have one.
Can we put forth a recommendation that that limitation be placed in the charter?
Yes, we can.
Because I think isn't it the intent of the public member to be a lay public member who would represent, a public member receiving services from the professionals represented by the BRN. I mean, I think that's the general intent, is it not?
Typically, I would, yes. But I would put any revisions to the charter has to be done through the board, so we can put that in front of the board.
Perfect. Yeah. And then there's been no BRN staff solicitation or outreach yet for a public member to this committee yet. Is that true?
So we were waiting until the November board meeting date to see if the APRNAC would continue. And if it does continue, we will solicit to fill the vacant spots. We did not want to solicit and start the filling of the vacant spots. That is a very strenuous project for the liaison to undertake and go through. And in the chance that the board does not continue, we did not want to get people's hopes up and have that plan to do that, because then we would have to then shift and go for either setting up the CNS or the CRNA advisory committees. And knowing that both of those positions would potentially either carry over to the new committee or want to be receive applications from those, we didn't want to cause too much of a confusion. So we are waiting at this point to get the decision from our board in November, and then we will go forward to fill positions for whatever committee comes forward from that board.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there any more comment from committee members before I make a motion? Barring no comments, then I'd like to make a motion that the established dates for the APRNAC for the year 2023 will be March 29th and March 29th and September 27th. Do I have a second?
Karen Karp, second the motion.
Thanks, Karen. Mark, you can open it up for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Erickson, there are no public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
You may close the window. Thank you, Mark. So the motion before the committee members for the selected dates is as stated, and Mitchell Erickson votes yes. Karen?
Karen Karp, yes.
Alyssa?
Yeah, here, Alyssa Brown. Yes.
Danielle?
Yeah, Danielle, yes.
Daniel Bloom? Sandra?
Sandra Bordy, yes.
Garrett?
Garrett Chan, yes.
Charlotte?
Charlotte Gullett Moore, yes.
The motion passes, and we'll move on to agenda item 7.0. Thank you, everyone. So this agenda item has to do with a oversight from our previous meeting in March 29th, which were items that were meant to be included when we were discussing FAQs around CNS practice. And so, or not established FAQs, but future or potential FAQs around CNS practice. And they unfortunately got missed. So we are bringing these forward now, and Alyssa Brown will speak to these and discuss what the future or possible development of FAQs around these particular items. And Alyssa, I'll leave this discussion to you.
Thank you. These were some items that I came across looking at some of the laws that we have and regs in California and federally that include clinical nurse specialists and other APRNs. And we didn't have anything on them. So I can see these going into FAQs and probably something that we can work together on, collaborate, because some titles are missing. One of those issues was about supervision of mental health workers. It was actually a recent bill that passed, and it is an effort to increase mental health services in the community, and it identifies who can supervise the individuals who are providing care for mentally ill in the community. And it includes clinical nurse specialists, social workers, and, you know, I think we need to just make it clear that we have that. It includes licensed marriage and family therapists, clinical counselors, licensed physicians. One of the things, and I'll probably work with a nurse practitioner on this, is it does not include psych nurse practitioners. It just includes psych clinical nurse specialists. So I wanted to bring that forward. And the other one was victims of
Alyssa, just
yeah.
before you move on, could you please state, just for the record, the legislation that you're referencing?
I'm sorry, Assembly Bill number 465, and it's chapter 137. And
Thank
it's
you.
an act to, the section is 5848.7 of the Welfare Institutions Code, and it's in addition to that act related to mental health.
Thank you so much, just for the record.
Another one is about victims of crime, and this is Cal VCB, Victims Compensation Board. And that relates to the California Code of Regulations, Title II, number 649.29. And again, it includes people who can care for victims of crime. And I remember being involved in this, and we added clinical nurse specialists. There is no, the nurse practitioner is not included here. And again, it's one, actually, I'm sorry, nurse practitioner is included. It says physician assistant nurse practitioner or clinical nurse specialist. And I think it's something that we all can, we can put in an FAQ for all the APRNs on this one. It was missing. The next one is very detailed, so I'm going to try and summarize, and it has to do with Public Health Service Act, 42 USC 300, and it identifies healthcare providers, and it provides a cross-reference table to show who is defined as a practitioner who can provide certain services. And it does identify clinical nurse specialists, registered dietitians, nurse midwives, and there are nurses who can provide services under this act. It's a very long document that you have in your packet, and it's under, let's see, State of California Health and Human Services Agency. So I just think that, again, we can work collaboratively on this to drum up an FAQ so that when people look at where else they are in the law and how it affects their practice, we can add these things to it. And the last one, the healthcare provider definition and cross-reference table is under the Office of National Coordinator for Health Information Technology. I think you have that in the materials. And it's 45 CFR Part 171 and Public Health Service Act. And again, it was things because I was researching that I thought would be useful for us and people to look at the references and the definition of the APRNs involved, to be involved in that. That's it, to make it short and sweet.
Thank you, Alyssa.
you.
Is there any, I'd like to open up discussion from the committee members.
I do want to jump in at this point and kind of have just a kind of brief overview on what the BRN's ability is. And so right now, if you do take a look on our website, there is the Nurse Practice Act. If you looked in our Business Professions Code, what you will see is Article 9 is specific to the clinical nurse specialist. And this Nurse Practice Act is what the BRN has jurisdiction over or under, essentially. And within that section, that is the only law that we can address as part of the BRN. So Article, sorry, losing my train of thought here. Sorry, Article 9 of our Business and Professions Code is 2838 to 2838.4. And that is the statutory requirements that are for clinical nurse specialists specifically. So underneath that, you'll actually see, if you did a quick little kind of glance through this, there really hasn't been any update to this statute since 1997. and it became effective in 1998. You will also notice down in our California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Division 14, there are 10 articles. None of them reference clinical nurse specialist. We have 0 regulations that address clinical nurse specialist practice. So I do understand that these are items that you guys would like to do some maybe FAQs on of some sort. Understand that each one of those codes and sections that you guys reference do not fall under our Nurse Practice Act and are not BRN specific at all. So if there are items that they have on the websites of the state agencies that have jurisdiction over those, we could carry links to those sections. We could refer to those sections from our website, but we can't necessarily develop FAQs that are outside of the jurisdiction of our BRN. And again, when we come to clinical nurse specialists, the clinical nurse specialist, the legal authority that we have is under the Business Professions Code, Article 9, which is 2838 to 2838.4. Those are the sections. So really, what needs to occur in order to clarify practice areas, to clarify expanded scope or anything with clinical nurse specialist is twofold. The board could start doing regulatory processes to further define the law that was in Article 9. Remember, when we do regulations, we cannot create new law. We could only explain current law that is written into our Nurse Practice Act. Now, if there is something that clinical nurse specialists are wanting that are not part of our Business Professions Code 2838 to 2838.4, then your professional organizations would be encouraged at that point to maybe find a bill writer, to get a bill proposed, have a bill carried through the legislative session, and if passes, then the BRN has more law that allows you all to expand that scope of practice. The other thing that the board can do is do regulations. Regulations are essentially the board's policies and procedures. They help us to carry out what happens in the statutory sections in our Business Professions Code. And there is some work that definitely needs to be done in that arena. Understanding that is not a small task. It is a very large task, and it would have to go through the administrative law procedure. It is about a 1 or a 2 year process at minimum to get that through. So I just want to let you guys know, FAQs are only used to clarify current law without expanding upon what is in that defined current law. And
Right.
the FAQs that the BRN can do can only be around the Nurse Practice Act, and that's the sections that we are given our authority through. So I'm welcome to taking this task on and looking at our current FAQs for CNSs. I know there's been some work done on that already. And really looking at that as we move forward to develop regulations. And if new law is created through a bill proposed into a future legislative session, we would be more than happy as a board to work towards implementing that as well. So I just want to let you know that it's not kind of a cut and dry process, that there are several different ways that we can approach this. And just to, thank you guys for putting the spotlight on this, getting the information out, and looking forward to embarking on getting some regulations developed around CNSs, providing as much clarification as possible. And if people want to reach out and ask questions on whether or not it is something that is allowed within our current BPC, I'd be happy to have those conversations as well as Reza. If it's not within set Article 9, 2838 to 2838.4, then it would need to be created in law, which would be through a bill, and it would have to go through that specific process in order for us to do anything at the board on this. Understand that within this section, there is only one section that's broken down in like 4 areas. It is the smallest section that we have. And so there is much room for growth if people do want to pursue that.
Thank you
Lori,
very much.
this is
No, I
Garrett.
appreciate you, Clara. Can I go first, Garrett, for a minute? I appreciate you clarifying that in the process. Garrett knows, and he's probably going to speak to it. We've been working on regulations since 1998. And so, you know, and I know Garrett worked with us on a new version, so we can look at that. Go on, Garrett.
So, actually, my question is for Reza, and it's one of the things that I would like clarification from a legal perspective is I very much appreciate Laurie, your explanation about the Nurse Practice Act, including the Business and Professions Code and Title 16 that make up the Nurse Practice Act. But it is my understanding, and this is where I need clarification from Reza on, is that a scope of practice is beyond just the Nurse Practice Act. The Nurse Practice Act does give a very significant foundation of what is legally possible for any professional that is overseen by, let's say, the Board of Registered Nursing. But to Alyssa's point, there are other parts of the California codes, as well as the regulations that do give guidance, even though they don't sit within Business and Professions Code or within Title 16, that do give authority, if you will, using this example, for nurses, advanced practice nurses, to do certain things. I think of signing for a disabled placard authority. I think about all these other things that we see in other parts of the code. And so isn't it within the BRN's jurisdiction, because the BRN regulates the practice of the licensees under the board, to consider that there are other sections of code that need to be considered outside of Business and Professions and Title 16. And I say that because in the printed book that the BRN publishes every year, there are different sections of code that the BRN basically is at least aware of, but would, if something were to, be violated, for example, and again, I just bring up the disabled placards law, statute, that the Board of Registered Nursing would have to respond to it, even if it's not within Business and Professions Code or Title 16.
So I think, first of all, I think that the general scope of practice, I would say it's within our Nursing Practice Act. There probably are examples like you've brought up outside of the Nursing Practice Act and outside of our laws that you bring up a good example that give authority to do certain things. The general scope of practice, though, is within the NPA. I think, I mean, we've talked before in a different context about, the example that comes to mind is where we were discussing billing for Medicare services, and that's outside of our regulation, and we had to kind of focus on the distinction between the scope of practice, which is within our purview, and billing under those insurance programs, which is entirely outside of our realm and the domain of another public agency. I think that when it comes to, you've probably, many of you may recall, I've focused a lot on kind of the limitations of what we can do by FAQs, and I think that's kind of what Lori was maybe trying to reiterate, and I appreciate that, because I think in the past, not necessarily the recent past, but historically, there has been some maybe kind of confusion and just a need to kind of rein in what's done by way of FAQs and advisories and things. So to kind of put my spin on it, a regulation, it is law. I will say that it has the force of law. A regulation can interpret or clarify a statute. So it's kind of constrained, but where there is a statute that's in need of clarification or interpretation, that's where a regulation comes in. An FAQ cannot clarify or interpret, it can merely kind of state what the law is. And if the law is unclear or in need of interpretation or regulation, we can't issue an FAQ or any document other than a regulation that says here's how we are interpreting this. So I think there is possibly room for an FAQ or an advisory that touches on areas that are not necessarily within our laws, but that affects our licensees. So, for example, like for CNSs, if these ones that Alyssa's brought up, these provisions from these are federal regulations. Obviously, those are not ours to change, or we don't have any control over federal regulations. But if the federal regulations speak to what a CNS can do, for example, under billing under Medicare, I think we could point out in an FAQ that, hey, there is this federal regulation that says X, Y, and Z. We couldn't interpret that in the FAQ, but we could direct people to it and say, hey, if a frequently asked question is, what can a CNS bill for under Medicare in the realm of mental health? And that's just maybe not a good example, but just for sake of throwing something out there.
With that, Reza, what we're doing on our website is referring back to the original website that has that information, because if it is updated, we wouldn't necessarily know that right away, and we would have an outdated information on our website. So as we're doing our website cleanup, if we have FAQs, if we have information that need to link back to a primary source, we would link it back to that primary source so that as it's updated, stays current, and our website then also stays current, if that makes sense. So this is
I'm sorry, Lori, I think
what nurses run into on a routine basis. And so Title 22 also kind of rules what nurses are required to do within specific organizations, et cetera. We can't, as the board, do anything with Title 22. Title 22 is under CDPH. But is a nurse required to follow Title 22? Yes, absolutely, they are. And if they don't follow Title 22, we could actually discipline them with, looking at, competent care and such under our NPA, under our Title 16, essentially. So there is some overlap, but again, we cannot do FAQs on Title 22. We would say, you know, this is where you would need to go to find that information, and we could link them to Title 22 within CDPH or direct them over to there. But that to me seems very a similar process that we can use for the majority of RNs to understand, is that the lot of the work that they do, their privileging, their assessments, all of that kind of stuff is specific to Title 22. Where the board establishes scope of practice, Title 22 says this is how you do that scope of practice. And so it gives that specific. So hopefully that helps to explain that a little bit further as well.
And that becomes the question. And I'm not saying that we should do it. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just reflecting on the concept that the bill that then became law, the Assembly Bill 465 that Alyssa identified in the first, in number 1 in the agenda information sheet, is when I pull it up, it's in the Welfare and Institution Code, right? So not business and professions, but welfare and institutions. And so,
is that okay?
Can we unmute everyone, please? Or mute everyone so Garrett, we can hear Garrett. Thank you.
okay. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, Garrett. Thank you.
I'm sorry. So again, I'm not saying that we should do it. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just reflecting that the bill AB 465 refers to the Welfare and Institutions Code. And so if a clinical nurse specialist wants to know more about this mental health worker supervision, to your point, Lori, is that the BRN would not create an FAQ, but would just point them to this particular section of Welfare and Institutions Code if they have questions about supervision of these mental health workers. So I think that
make an FAQ, Garrett, that says something like, can CNSs supervise mental health workers? And so then our response would be, currently this is allowed through, and then we would link to where it is done. And for details, please click on that link so that you can get the details around it. So we would have the question and then lead them to where they need to go to get the answer. But we could still have the question answer on our site. We would have the question posed and the answer where it directs them to the answer, if that makes sense, away from us.
Absolutely.
That
makes sense.
that it's not under the BRN, but yes, it can be done, but it's being managed through this other organization. And here's the information to click on that, and you can find out more. It's a similar comment. I get comments a lot that says, can RNs supervise MAs? No, RNs cannot supervise MAs. But we don't say that RNs can't supervise MAs, right? Like that goes to the medical board. So when we get questions like that, we direct the person to go to the medical board, look at the FAQs under medical assistants, and it'll say that RNs can train medical assistants, but they cannot supervise. But APRNs, your nurse practitioners, your nurse midwives can. They can supervise MAs because of the recent changes in the laws, et cetera, and it calls that out. And so, again, we at the BRN have our scope of practice. We have our kind of lane that we have to stay in, but we can absolutely direct off to do that. So it's similar. I get questions on compounding. Okay, so we don't define compounding. We know that our nurses can't do that, but we know that there's also some specific uses. So then we would refer them over to the pharmacy board. And then the pharmacy board has specific stuff that they have on their website for compounding and who can and how can it be done, et cetera. And so in our response, we would send them to the pharmacy board for that information. If that gives further clarification, Garrett.
I just want to say,
I really appreciate,
I think actually what I'm hearing is that we actually all agree on the same thing.
Yes.
We're not, I don't think we're in opposition here. I think what's being asked is that we create resources for the public. I want to get away from the licensee side and professional organizations, but for the public to know where they can get additional information that has some kind of impact or has some kind of influence over the licensees that are under the purview of the BRN. And I think what's being suggested here is that whether you call it a resource or whether you call it an FAQ, we can easily avoid interpretation that are not under the purview of the BRN. We're simply stating, if you had a question about, as you suggested, Loretta, here's the link. We're not going to help you interpret the link. We're not going to say what you do with the link. Here's the link. You do whatever you need as a member of the public. And because there are a lot of public members who work in the health industry that are not licensed professionals, but have these questions of the licensed professionals they hire, supervise, and oversee. So I think that it would not be unreasonable to include links to things that help guide people that have some mention, influence, or impact on the practice of the professionals that you do oversee at the BRN. So I think
does
that's
have to
what we're
go
all
back to-
saying.
It does have to go back to primary source, though, just so you completely understand. It has to go back to the law. When
Yes.
we refer out, we would refer out to the med board, we refer out to the pharmacy board, we refer out to the California Department of Public Health, essentially like that,
Right.
not to any professional organization. We cannot.
Oh,
Right.
yeah,
So
and
just
I
so
don't,
you're
yeah, and that
completely
was,
aware,
that
it
was
has
the
to go back
intent.
to primary source.
Yeah,
That's
Loretta
always
and
the
Mitch,
case.
I agree. I think, and Garrett, I mean, I think we are saying the same thing. That was the intent. It wasn't to put all this stuff in an FAQ. And I think if we word it as you suggested as a question, so that it's easy for your staff as well, and the public and other professionals to find the information with a link to the original source. That sounds great. I was just bringing up issues that we don't have right now and that we need to look for. So thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
But I think the other second thing that's come up here is the regulations around that are under the purview of the BRN around CNS practice, and that given that there seems to be a paucity of content, that this is the committee where those kinds of recommendations can emanate from, in terms of defining CNS practice under those regulations that are in the NPA. So, and Title 16. So, Alyssa and Garrett, did we cover pretty much?
You have from my perspective, and we actually have a draft. We just have to get it again. Yeah.
Then
Just
would
for
recommend.
just for clarity, Mitch, the
Yeah.
agenda information sheet is on CNSs that work in mental health. So the question
Right.
of regulation is off the table
Got it.
for this discussion.
Right.
Right.
We'll
But
put it on the
since-
next agenda.
Next agenda, just because Lori brought it up. So I just wanted to put it out there for a future. All right. Does
Thank you.
anyone, other committee members have any other comments about this discussion?
This is Reza. Real quick, I just want to say a couple things. First of all, Mitch, I appreciate the way you kind of brought it back around full circle and kind of, pointed out that we're all on the same page. I think, as you pointed out, we can do something with these items that Alyssa's brought forward. And as Lori's pointed out, they will be kind of referencing the original source of authority. So maybe what I would probably suggest going forward, there can be substantive discussion about these items, these specific ones that were in the materials and that Alyssa went through. Aside from that, I think maybe whether it's here or just offline, you can kind of suggest what the question would be and what the source of authority is that kind of answers that question. and then we can work on getting that into the website update. And I know that I don't know that we have kind of a landed on what the format is going to look like exactly for the website update. That I'm sure is a massive kind of undertaking that's going to take a little bit of time, but whatever the format is, these can kind of be worked into that. Also, Mitch, just I caught the you're pointing out that kind of staying away from the licensees and the associations, and that this is really for the benefit of the public at large, and there is some value to the public generally of being able to see, have answers to some of these questions. And that really is our focus, is public protection and advancing the public's interest. And so I appreciate you also just throwing that out there to kind of make sure we're keeping that focus. So I don't know if this is something that we will, that you all want to formulate those questions on the spot here, or just maybe have kind of a general discussion, if to whatever extent necessary, or maybe it's not necessary. And then Alyssa or whoever you all want to kind of appoint can submit some information to Lori and I, and get that processed.
So why don't we, given that Alyssa will be the current sole CNS representative, why don't we leave it to you, Alyssa, to formulate a question, tie in the direct link to the original source document that guides the question, for at least what you've presented through the AIS today. And then, Loretta, what's easiest for your staff to deal with this internally offline? So we just forward that to myself, Reza, and you, or would it be best to bring whatever Alyssa formulates back to our next committee meeting, should that occur?
So it would go to myself, Reza Macaulay, and
Okay.
we would then start to look at that. Once we did the evaluation, we could then reach back out to you and let you know whether or not it would have to go back to the meeting, or if it would be handled a different way. But until we know what we're receiving and be able to kind of assess that, then we wouldn't know what next steps are. But please always include Macaulay, as she's still currently the liaison, myself and Reza, in all communication.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what I'll do, so there's not anything to really vote on here. What I will do then is I will just put out a reminder email, and then Alyssa can formulate this and then forward it to you guys at the BRN. And then you can make a determination of whether it comes back to us as a committee or whether it can just be managed internally offline.
Sounds great. And since we're not doing a vote, it would just be public comment, and then we would
Exactly.
go on to the next agenda item.
So Mark,
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for that great conversation. Mark, it's your game.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I would like a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Erickson, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
We may move on to agenda 8.0. So this agenda item is in response to we had established at prior APR and AC meetings subcommittees for each of the professions that are represented in the committee, and this is in response to the CRNA subcommittee in terms of recommended revisions to FAQs on the website regarding CRNA, I believe, certification. And I will hand this over to Karen and Sandra.
Thank you, Mitch. This is Karen Karp. And I just want to explain that prior to 2007, there were two councils that recertified nurse anesthetists. One was for recertification for newly certified nurse anesthetists, and that was the Council on Certification of Nurse Anesthetists, and the other was for recertification of nurse anesthetists who were already CRNAs. And in 2007, those two councils incorporated and became one, and they were renamed the National Board of Certification and Recertification for Nurse Anesthetists, or the NBCRNA. And so what happened is that this new certification board, because of the renaming, now everything on the Board of Registered Nursing still had the old names of the two certification boards. So we would like to see all the literature on the Board of Registered Nursing reflect the correct name of our certification board. And so that was what action item number 8 is all about. So that's the action item in a nutshell. And we're happy to take any questions.
I have some questions for you, Karen, just real quick.
Yes.
On our business profession code 2826, it says what a nurse anesthetist is, and it says shall consider the standards of the Council on Certification of Nurse Anesthetist and the Council on Recertification of Nurse Anesthetist, and may develop new standards if there's a public safety need for standards more stringent than the council standards. So my understanding is that needs to be changed. Is that correct?
It depends. So
Saying that that's not their name any longer, right? And so that statute.
That is correct.
We could get a cleanup bill of some sort. If I am doing like this, I wish I would have had this just in the front of my mind going through our sunset bill. I could have asked for that to be changed and it would have been quick. But since it's not, this is where it is important to understand like where these sections are created through, right? And so this is our business professions code. This is done through bills. And through the legislator. So any updates to these has to go through a bill process. And a bill writer has to take it on. They have to do the language cleanup. So if you guys do on your review find stuff in our business profession code that need to be addressed, we will have to address that through legislation. Once that's addressed through legislation, then we can address that through regulation or FAQs or whatever. So I hear you on this needs to be cleaned up, and we will start the process on getting that cleaned up. But I want to let you guys know that this has to be changed in statute, and that is outside of the BRN, but we can request that.
Correct.
So
thank you.
Have that for me. We can start on that process.
Thank you. We're aware, but thank you.
I have a question, Loretta. If part of the BRN's function, though, is to license CRNA professionals, and those licensing requirements include certification, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
From a national certifying body. Is that what you're asking? Right. Not our certification. So the reason the pause is so the way that the BRN is laid out, which is not completely transparent to, people coming in and not understanding it. We have an RN license. That is the license that everything bounces from. So our nurse practitioner, our nurse midwife, our nurse anesthetist, our clinical nurse specialist, what we call them are certifications. And those are certifications that are connected to your license. So when you say certification, I have to go, wait, BRN certification, or are you talking about national certification? So just so that you understood my pause and kind of wait one. So yes, national certification is a requirement for licensure as a certified registered nurse anesthetist
under
through our
your certification
under our
process.
third certification. So just to add more confusion to that, let's just throw that out there.
Okay, well, given that clarification, so in order to be certified by the BRN as a CRNA, you have to have national certification in order to get that certification from the BRN. And would it not be under the BRN's purview then to define or to name where that certification comes from? So you approve which certifications you accept. And so I get the business and profession code change in statute, but can you not define in BRN regulation where that certification comes from?
Sometimes, and that is done through regulation.
So this would be another
board can't just
regulatory.
the board just can't say, yeah, I want to do this. It has to be defined through regulation. It has to go through that OAL process, unless the business profession code specifically calls out and says you can do this absence of the I'm losing my word. It's the goodness, it was just in our sunset bill. Reza, help me out. The Administrative Procedures Act, is that the word that I'm looking for? So so you'll see in 2786, which is our sunset bill, it says that I can, as the EO, define uniform standards that I can update, publish to our website, and they have given us a out so that we don't have to go through the Office of Administrative Law. We don't have to go through and establish it through that process. Unless there is a specific call out for that, then we have to do regulations.
So in other words, there are two pathways here. I mean, obviously one requires legislation, one requires a regulatory change, and I guess the question is the path of least resistance in terms of trying to get the BRN, the way it identifies its certifying process, to reflect what the certifying process actually is.
So again, that's where we come against a conundrum again to really explain. And back to, again, why we have these kind of lengthy discussions and talk about the need of an additional advisory committee. The Nurse Anesthetist Business Profession Code, which is the law that was put in there by the legislators through a bill process that's signed and gone into law, starts at Article 7 and it's 2825, and that goes through 2833.6. And those have not been touched since the early 80s. There's been a couple updates, very rare updates. One, I think, was in 2018. Another one was in 1991, and fees were updated in 2016. But content change, those have been set there and stagnant since 83. And what you'll also notice is that in this California Code of Regulations, where we have specific call outs for pre-licensure nursing programs, we have specific call outs for nurse midwives and for nurse practitioners and for public health nurses. We do not have any regulations for nurse anesthetist. So this is where regulations have to be created. It is much different and a lot easier to update regulations that are already in law, right? You go in there, and if your regulations conflict with new law that's been passed, if like a business professions code update and a regulation conflicts, if it's a direct conflict, we can do a Form 100. You turn that in through the Office of Administrator Law, and you typically have turnaround and change within 2 or 3 months. It's a very, very quick down and dirty kind of process. We can repeal sections, we can update things that way. We can bring things into the future where we do he and she, we can change it to they and thems. And we can really do those through a Form 100 process. When you go to creating regulations or updating regulations, that is a much more in-depth process. And it is typically a year or two once the process starts. Now, and that's starting with the board. So prior to the board, you have to do stakeholder meetings, you do subject matter experts, you bring them all on. And there are some boards that they can take 2 to 3 years or longer for that process before it even gets to the board, before the board can even go through and say, yes, I approve this language, let's start the regulatory process. So there, again, is a lot of work to be done. But to answer the original question on whether or not we can change the council names, what I'm needing you guys to understand is those council names are in law. They're in the business profession code. I can't change those, but what we can do is try to provide some clarification while we ask for those to be changed. And hopefully next legislative session, someone will sign on, have a bill going through that affects nursing, which I'm sure there will be. There were 20 some or more last year. And so in a bill that's going through that looks like it's got some kind of backing and move through, we can say, hey, can you include this in there as well? They can then update that. And by the end of the next legislative season, if it is signed, we can then have this updated automatically through that process. And that would be a very quick timeline, faster than doing regulations. Absolutely. If we could get a bill writer to take it, update that, that's the easiest way for us to manage through that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So that all being said, it sounds, Karen and Sandra, that the best course of action, and this obviously with the BRN support, is that you identify a legislator and begin that conversation to say, hey, I need your input. This is this is not controversial, obviously. This is pretty straightforward. I can't imagine that there would be a legislator that would be in opposition, and I can't imagine there would be any professional organization in opposition. It is the reality. There's nothing to debate. Because that's the organization. And there are several legislators that are very healthcare friendly, let's say.
Yes.
And we have a pharmacist in the legislature. We have all kinds of health. We have a social worker. We have all kinds of legislators who I'm sure would be happy to support this.
Yes.
And if you're looking for some comparable language, which is really a lot of times bill writers need, right? If you look at our Business Professions Code 2746.5, there is a great statement that actually says, and this is for midwives, it says the certification to practice nurse midwifery authorizes the holder to attend cases of low risk pregnancy, childbirth, and to provide prenatal, interpartum, and postpartum care, including interconception care, family planning, it goes on. And it says, with the core competencies for basic midwifery practice adopted by the American College of Nursing Midwives, and this is the statement, or its successor, national professional organization, as approved by the board. And that allows us to have that ability to move forward, right? So right now it is the American College of Nurse Midwives, but this BPC then says, or its successor national professional organization. So you guys can put that in there as approved by the board. And so then what happens at that point, we find out there's a successor, it's a national organization, we bring it in front of our board says yes, boom, we move forward with that. And that solves that problem. So if you're looking for language that can capture where we're at now, where we need to go, that's a good language to give as an example to any legislator that wants to take that on.
That's very smart. And we did we did discuss language that might have the ability to look at other alternative types of bodies that in just in case this one would be supplanted by another. So that would be very smart to do. Thank you.
Amazing how 2 words, so or successor, can make the difference. It should be in every piece of legislation around certifying
Really
bodies.
should.
It's like
really
crazy.
should. If I had my way, I'd say please put or its successor approved by the board, and anything that says has references a form, just take them out of reference. I hate that we can't change forms. So thank you.
Thank you.
And then, of course, Karen, as you embark on this through the professional organization, you can address any other things of interest that the legislator might be willing to support that relate to CRNA practice. Given given that it doesn't sound like there's anything to approve here or to vote on, is there any other discussion around this particular item? I do want to bring up, this was where Garrett and Ray said, is this where you want to bring up NPR I-21 and NPR IB-42, or do you want to leave that to offline?
Were those the CNS advisories that kind of just needed some minor grammatical or
Correct.
technical updates?
Yes, those are correct. Can we, I mean, we could go back to agenda item 7.0 and do it there, but it's up to you. The recommendation was to put it here, so that's why I left it to here.
Okay.
Is it shared in our meeting minutes?
That's I'm not sure that
they were previously voted on and approved at a prior meeting, but there were some minor language changes to those 2 items, just minor.
I think I mean I as far as which agenda item, you know, I think we can go ahead and keep it in this one. It's fine. For, you know, just for transparency, I think I'll just say that Garrett had reminded us that there were some advisories that had been discussed at a prior APRN AC meeting and some changes proposed, and a couple of them required just some kind of minor cleanup. And so I worked with Garrett and proposed some of those kind of minor edits, and he had proposed some of those minor edits, and so we kind of collaborated and got it to where, you know, those changes that needed to be made had kind of been identified and proposed. So they're not in the materials. I think, you know, I think we've taken the approach with these types of advisories that, you know, it doesn't necessarily require committee action in the form of a motion to, you know, to do that type of thing. Of course, we can discuss as a committee those types of substantive advisories and things like that. And the substance especially is where committee input is particularly helpful. But in this case, it really wasn't substantive. It was just some kind of cleanup and updating of it. So again, unfortunately, it's not in the materials to kind of show what was done, but I think we can probably move forwards with it without formal committee action. And I say it, and I'm glad you brought it up, just for the committee's awareness that those were looked at. There were some other advisories that required a little bit more kind of substantive work and brought to light that we may need some regulations to be worked on. But as those are not really, you know, those are substantive items and they're not part of this agenda. So look forward to some discussion about those more substantive ones at future meetings. But yeah, so those 2 that you mentioned, Mitch, I forget the numbers, NPR, whatever they were. I think those we're at a point where we can just accept the changes that Garrett and I had kind of batted back and forth, and go ahead and have those cleaned up and posted.
Okay, so
Yeah.
those, just for the
And Mitch,
record. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. For the record, sorry. There's a little bit of noise. I apologize on my end. Just for the record, it was more of a status update. The committee has already reviewed it, already approved it. There were some minor changes, so there is no need. I mean, that it's just more of a status update. So there's no action to be taken because the action has already been taken.
Right. And so just for the record, though, it's NPR I-21 and NPR B-42. And then the other two, as Raisa pointed out, will deal with internally and then determine whether it needs to come back to this committee for review. I did just want to make one comment about something that I overheard in this discussion. I don't know that it's necessary for there to be a separate CRNA and CNS committees to tackle what seems to be the paucity of regulation around those two professions' practice under the BRN. I think this committee is certainly capable of doing that with the scope of the professionals that we have on this committee. So I'm just putting that out there. I don't think that this committee needs to be abandoned because of its inability to address practice regulations for CNSs and CRNAs. It's nice to have the perspective of the other professionals in this group as sort of a way to rebound thoughts and ideas off of in the discussion, but just saying that. Any other comments from the committee, given that there's nothing to approve?
No, I agree with what you said. Thank you, Mitch. And thank you, everyone. And thanks to Garrett again and to Charlotte for all the work you did. So thank you.
And yes, Charlotte, it's been a delight to work with you, and I hope you all the success in your public office venture.
Yeah.
It's great to have another health professional representing public office. I think given there's nothing to vote on, we can move to agenda 9.0, which is...
Do we need public comment?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I guess, sure. Never thought about it. Go ahead, Mark.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comment. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Erickson, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
You may. Thank you, Mark. And that brings us to item 9.0, which is the adjournment of this meeting, and we are 7 minutes early. So thank you, everyone.
Before, Mitch?
Pardon?
Has that ever happened before? 7 minutes early?
Absolutely, it has happened before. My job as the chair is to ensure that we are on time, because we need to ease the workload of the BRN staff. So thank you, everyone. And again, congratulations, Charlotte, on your venture. And thank you, Garrett. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you all in March next year.
Thank you, guys. We'll be in touch.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.